So it's just like any other office, you get that benefit of being able to get that in-person time with your team and your people. And I think that's really important, whether you're a distributed company or work remote. Like, every business owner and employer does need to have a strategy for that. And there's different ones, but co-working is, I think, one of the best options out there.
Hey everyone, welcome to Honey and Hustle. I am your host, Angela Hollowell, and today I'm speaking with Deshawn Brown. He is the co-founder of Coworks, which is an app that works with co-working spaces here in North Carolina and beyond. In today's episode, you will learn how co-working spaces can facilitate the growth your business needs to grow to the next level. Thanks so much for joining us today. This podcast is free and will always be free and available on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, Good Pods, Hey Tide, you name it. While it's free for you to consume, it's not free for us to create. We pay our video editors, writers, production assistant, and operations manager for helping us make this show come to life. If you'd like to support us in making this show, please consider subscribing to our Substack community, using our affiliate links, or just simply sharing the show with someone who might enjoy it. All right, let's get into this conversation. You are the founder of Coworks, which is an app built for co-working spaces like this one, American Underground.
Right.
Talk to me about the many problems that you experience at co-working spaces, as I'm sure I could name a ton.
Yeah. I think, so we were just co-working members before, we had a software for co-working spaces. So I definitely felt a lot of those pain points myself. I think, as a co-working space member, especially if you've never been in co-working before or even in startups before, getting used to this concept of like shared space can take some people some time. And it's also, in the co-working world, it's very hospitality focused. We call it like space as a service, right? Because the idea is that you walk in and everything you need is there: meeting room, desk space, whatever it is, coffee, beer, the essentials. And so I think a lot of people also just kind of assume everything is going to be, they could just kind of snap their fingers and there's going to be a person to solve all their problems. So I kind of saw there was this disconnect there from the member side of just like being able to quickly and easily actually access all of the shared resources. So how do I book a room? How does this coffee maker work? Who am I supposed to ask for this question or that question? And so those were sort of the, I think, initial pain points as a member. And then also, like, how do you get plugged into the community? Because, again, that's the other kind of selling point is there's these other people with these other businesses and skill sets that I can access and, build a relationship with. So that was kind of the initial set of challenges. But what really kind of inspired us for Coworks was the manager challenges. So unless you run a co-working space, you'll probably never know or care about this stuff. But that's when we really kind of opened our eyes like, oh, wait a minute. There's a reason we're having a hard time getting in touch with these managers and figuring out how this stuff works. And it's because there's so many moving parts and systems and pieces behind the scenes. So the people running the space are struggling just to manage it themselves. And it kind of has a trickle-down effect to the members. So that's kind of, what we are trying to solve. Yeah.
Co-working, or as you call it, space as a service, is relatively a model that's gotten more popular since 2020, right? So we've seen like a boom in people saying, well, yeah, I can work from home, but I'm not the most productive at home because there's pets and there's kids and there's my fridge and there's my TV. And like, you're not necessarily escaping those things with a co-working space, but you now have access to a space that is at least somewhere that orients you to work and be more productive. How do you think having an app that lets you kind of like take a step back as a member from kind of the day-to-day questions that you have makes you more productive? Because I guess in my mind, it's like when I think about an app, it's like, okay, there's one more thing I got to download, one more thing I have to figure out how to use, and one more thing standing between me and a human,
Yeah, it's a really good question, and I think you're definitely right about just kind of the first point about even though work from home is bigger than ever now. There's some dangers in your house, the fridge, the bed, the TV, and yeah, and I think we've seen that in the co-working industry, like the market that wasn't really open before is the sort of remote work and sort of transient type of employee who is looking to get away from their house because there's all these people who never worked from home and now they can and they do, but it's not necessarily the best for them and the best setup. People just need, there's some people who just need that human-to-human interaction. Yeah. Like you said, your house might not actually be the most productive place given the other things. So yeah, that's kind of, I think, been the biggest growth that we've seen in the space is people who just say, hey, like I need something that's not my house, but I don't want to pay a big, huge lease and, get a 10-year commitment on an office space or something like that. They just want something where they can drop in and do what they need to do. Now, you bring up a good point about apps. I think that's kind of the paradox of being in the technical world and trying to build community-based software. And everything we do at Coworks is very community-focused. And so the paradox is, by putting it in an app on the phone, now you're just kind of, it's another thing. It's another barrier. So we're really, really sensitive to that. Like, for example, a lot of people wanted us to build like a chat in the app and do like an inbox. And I was really, really hesitant, even though it seems like an obvious feature. But, I was like, same thing. It's like, well, people already have LinkedIn. They already have Slack. They already have email. They already have the group text. Like, they've got so many things. Do they really need that from us? Do they really want that from us? So that's just kind of an example of, even if there's an obvious feature, we don't just build it just because it's another thing we can add to the app. We're really sensitive to, let's let the members of the spaces and the managers who are running these spaces tell us what the real needs are, and instead push the things that are actually getting them closer to their community. So what I mean by that is, like, the first thing in our app is an events feed. So the first thing that you can see is just like, here's all the stuff that's actually happening in real life in the space.
Right.
So now we're actually helping you engage with that community and meet other people because we're putting that information front and center that otherwise either you probably never would have seen because it's stuck in your inbox, or you had to, dive deep to get. The other thing is like, we have a directory, and like the big thing that we focus on is like, there's a huge photo and your name is like also super huge. So like name and face. So we kind of like through our design and user experience tried to like do things that help actually facilitate the real world counterpart. So when you go see that person in the co-working space, you've got confidence because like you've seen their face and their name in large font over and over in the app. And so it kind of gives you that confidence to be like, Angela, I think I know you, you do this. We haven't met yet, but I work upstairs, I'm downstairs, I'm across the hall. So I think that's how we, but I am really sensitive to that. And I think technology can really help facilitate and really just kind of propel actual human interactions if it's intentional from the design standpoint. So, and we do our best.
Yeah. So for people who maybe come, let's say maybe they either come as like a solo person who just like has a job that allows them to work remote, or they come because like their startup has a space there. So they may be a part of a small team and they're like, okay, now I'm a part of this community. So not only am I interacting with people that I work with every day, but now I'm interacting with other people. And that may or may not be helpful, may or may not be something they're like anticipating on that scale. What are some of the feedback that you've seen that people are saying like, wow, like I get social time and work time, and this has been super helpful for me as a worker?
Yeah, I love that question because, I think, again, that's why co-working is so kind of unique in that regard, because you're right, you have beyond just your, so first of all, just your team. So it's just like any other office, you get that benefit of being able to get that in-person time with your team and your people. And I think that's really important. And I think whether you're a distributed company or work remote, like every business owner and employer does need to have a strategy for that. And there's different ones, but co-working is, I think, one of the best options out there to address that. But yeah, I think then there's the other people. So I think you're 100% right. I think it definitely allows you to kind of get whatever needs you want somewhat on your terms. So yes, most of the best co-working spaces are designed with, I think, a good blend of the open co-working kind of bullpen style of work, but then also like breakout spaces, whether that be just like phone rooms and pods or meeting rooms, or private offices, dedicated desks. Now, obviously every space is different, but that's what I see being the most successful in co-working today is when you can get both and then you can kind of choose your own adventure. So for me, we've got a private office in a co-working space. I'm in calls all the time. I'm in meetings all the time. I have to have a lot of focused work. So it allows me to kind of go hide away and, tuck away and do work. But then I can also just come downstairs and like immediately get filled with that, social capital that I need. And then, again, because it's not it's not a club or a coffee shop, even though there are some co-working clubs and coffee shops. There's there's a lot of different styles of co-working, which we can get into. But I think, people know it's a workspace. So like if you're really trying to get something done, I feel like that's become a pretty good culture now too, where like you're not forced to disengage from your work and be social just because there's other people. And I think if you've never worked out of a co-working space, it might be hard to understand that, but like it's an office, right? It just so happens to be not boring and quiet and just there's energy there, but you can do it on your terms if you've got a good community.
Yeah. So I have two questions. The first of which pertains to entrepreneurs and like small businesses that are and startups that are using co-working spaces.
Yeah.
The first one being like co-working spaces, a lot of the allure for them is the fact that, yes, I may be paying, this monthly amount, but I don't have that big investment that I would normally have if I were to try to lease or like build this for myself. I don't have to buy my own furniture and chairs and outfit the space with carpet or think about, how to get internet linked up. It's kind of an all-in-one thing. You go and they have everything ready for you. And now, of course, they have the benefit of using this app where they can kind of like navigate all of those resources really, really effectively.
Right.
Talk to me about like some of the small businesses and entrepreneurs that you've seen maybe start from nothing. Like their co-working space is probably one of their first big investments and how that has really like worked for them.
Yeah, that's a good question. And I can start by just using myself. My first company, I had a development agency. So it was mobile and web design and development called Lithios. That business is still going strong. That team is awesome. And in the early days, we had not a lot of money because I started it right out of university. I went to NC State. So as soon as I graduated, we basically went all in on Lithios. And I distinctly remember we got our first office downtown, and I was kind of got a good deal from a good mentor of mine who like had an extra room in his like office suite, and he let me rent it out and that kind of thing. But I remember we hired some interns, our first intern. So we just got our first office, our first intern. We were doing really well. And we walked in, and so we had no furniture. So it was like I had to use my kitchen table. And we brought that in, and that was our desks. And we had this big table, and we sat around it. I don't even remember where we got chairs from. Oh, there was another company that was moving out, and we were like, hey, can we keep the chairs? And they're like, yeah, we were just going to throw these away. So, you just kind of, I had to deal with all that stuff, but I wasn't thinking about that. And I remember the intern came in and she was like, hey, there's no sink. And I was like, oh, is like the bathroom like broken or what? And she was like, no, like in here, there's no sink. And I was like, what? And she was like, yeah, so how am I going to wash my mug? And also there's no coffee maker. So how am I going to make my coffee? And I was just like, I just go downstairs and get coffee from the coffee shop. I don't know. But yeah, like we didn't have a kitchen in the space, right? It was just kind of like an office suite. So that's kind of what she was saying. But she just kind of expected, oh, we have an office, so therefore we have a full kitchen and a full fridge. Like, I was like, no, you're lucky we were able to have these walls. But yeah, so with co-working, you don't have to think about that. You just kind of show up and, you've got all those things. So, so I kind of experienced that myself. It also allowed us to get plugged into the community. A lot of our first customers at Lithios were just literally other people in the space. And they're like, oh, you guys do apps? And then we would kind of meet with them and connect with them. But we've seen a lot of companies do that. They're able to just focus on the business, focus on the product, and not have to worry so much about some of the operational stuff. I mean, in Raleigh in particular, they tell the big story about Pendo. Pendo's a big company here in the area, and they've got thousands of employees worldwide, a big, huge, office building in downtown with their logo on it.
Right.
And they had a little tiny co-working office, and I remember seeing them, and it was like 6 or 7 guys like stuffed into like a 3-person office. And they would just always be standing and wearing their pink Pendo t-shirts and just kind of hustling. And, I think, again, they were focused on the product and the company and not rent and leases. So, yeah, it can really help you focus in that regard.
Yeah. Something you kind of mentioned kind of like offhandedly was like co-working and working amongst other businesses allowed you to meet potential clients and things like that.
Yeah.
Which I think a lot of people, again, if they're entrepreneurs, are not thinking about having all of that be in one space, right?
For sure.
And sometimes, especially when you are focused on paying the bills and like the product, you're not necessarily thinking about how do I garner new business, right?
Yeah.
And so like, talk to me about like networking, because that's something that I will scream to the ends of the earth is what helped me get off my feet in a completely new place where I didn't know anybody, right?
Yeah.
And this is before I was co-working, and I still don't necessarily co-work like a regular person, but, understanding the value of having accessible networking events and networking opportunities is like something like people really don't think about the cost of acquisition for a new customer or client.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. I would love to just do a report on this or something and like kind of try to quantify that number, because I'm sure we probably could. But yeah, I mean, I think to me, that's why I'm passionate about co-working. It's one of the reasons why with Coworks, like why we're focused on really empowering these managers and, building our community of co-working spaces because of how they impact the community. These spaces just naturally become hubs. American Underground, I don't think anybody in Durham would argue, is like, they're a huge piece of the startup community here. I think when you think entrepreneurship and startups, like that's immediately what you think of for Durham. And there's a reason for that. I think, it's more than just an office space, right? You have that community, you have that entrepreneurs. And so, yeah, the network is huge. And again, back to kind of how we think about the product, we're trying to help managers sell that as well. So again, that community feed, the events feed being the first thing you see. And it's like, we're doing this because we want to make our people and our customers, who are the managers and operators running the space, we want to actually free up their time so that they can focus on those things. So we handle all of the like billing of all the different tenants, all the members, the, occupancy, like who's in what office, who has what desk, all the booking and reservation goes through Coworks. So we're trying to automate as much of that back office stuff as we can so that the people in the space that are running the space can actually be those facilitators. And that's when I think they unlock a whole new revenue stream for themselves as a business, because now like chambers of commerce want to partner with them, big businesses and enterprises want to come in and say, hey, can we come do like a happy hour in your space? And can we go talk about our new product? You guys have a big community of business professionals. This is one of the like, most sought after audiences, in software. It's people who are professionals who presumably have some kind of spending power, right? And a lot of times you get these co-working spaces and you've got all of them right there. It's kind of a neutral thing, right? Like you can't go into some company's headquarters and then just be like, can I go sell to your employees? They'd be like, what are you, I'm calling security. Like, you know, a co-working space allows and affords you that ability to actually, I think, interact with your community and network with your community. So I think, yeah, huge value add. That's how my businesses got started, just being in the space. And then for me, realizing once you go, like, I thought it was just something unique to Raleigh or unique to Durham, which, you know, in the back of my mind, I was kind of wishing that that was the case. But it's better that we're not that special. And what I mean by that is we are doing it really well, but it's happening everywhere. All over the country, all over the world even. What I realized is the US is actually even behind in the co-working world. In Europe, co-working's been around for way longer, and they've just been, they're used to this idea of shared space and shared office, and they're like, oh yeah, we've been doing this since early 2000s. Why would you ever pay for a building? Like, and yeah, so I think, yeah, that community is a super underrated value out of co-working, to be able to just literally get sales. I mean, again, in our first couple of years of business, I think half of our contracts were just other people in the space who either moved in or been there, and we saw each other at lunch, that kind of thing.
Okay. So switching gears, just to talk about Coworks more specifically now.
Yeah.
So coming from Luthios, you already had the technical expertise to make an app, right?
Yeah.
So you didn't necessarily have to go the whole, well, I'm a founder and I'm looking for a technical founder and all these things. Like, you already had the experience of wearing both hats of like running the business and building the thing, right? But now you're just doing it for you and for, you know, co-working spaces. So talk to me about kind of the building phase of Coworks, because it doesn't sound like it looks like, well, we need to raise money to make this thing, right? You could just make the thing and worry about the money later. And I say worry about the money later. You need money, obviously. But like,
yes,
you know.
always, unfortunately. Yeah, no, that's a really good point. And I think we're really fortunate in that regard. And, you know, I didn't grow up interested in coding or programming or anything like that. I was more of like a theater person.
Oh, you were a theater kid.
I was a theater kid.
Okay.
One of those. But I don't know, I really liked storytelling. I liked that creative side. I was also really good at math and science, so I liked logic and analytical stuff, and I really just was good at it, and that's why I liked it. But the creative side is what I was more passionate about. So I was always trying to figure out a way to like do both. I was like, well, I like, you know, solving complex problems and challenges, but like I also want to be creative, and it kind of felt like I always had to do one or the other. And it wasn't until I really learned about entrepreneurship and then startups and tech that I kind of had this aha moment of like, okay, wait a minute, I can like come up with these ideas for products and solutions and then use programming to actually build it. And I don't need distribution and, you know, textiles and manufacturing and all this stuff. We could just kind of learn how this works and deploy it. So I say all that just to say that was kind of always intentional for me of like, okay, let me learn this skill so that I then am able to get straight to the creative and doing and problem solving bit and not have to be full of ideas all the time and just, to your point, have to wait and find other people who can help me. And I think that was kind of the challenge. It was like, how do I just kind of bridge that gap so that I can really like, again, tangibly execute on these ideas and the creativity that I had. And I was really trying to blend them both. So that was actually the idea of Lithios from the start. It just so happened that we worked on other people's apps because, you know, we actually we started by building our own apps.
Okay.
So we were at NC State, we became like the app guys where we would just put out these really silly, random apps. Some of them went viral, some of them totally flopped. And you know, we were college kids solving college problems, which were not very not important problems. But people saw that, and then they would actually, a lot of those people graduated and said, hey, I remember when I was on campus and we used your app. I'm now doing this startup. Can you help me build my app? So to your point about the people needing the money and the technology, they came to us. So we immediately learned like, okay, we actually have these skills, we can monetize that. So we did that, and we were able to get that initial traction doing that. But yeah, that was the vision for me from the beginning. So when we came across Coworks, I was always kind of waiting for like the right problem that I had the right mix of like, do I care about this? Do I feel like it's got a big enough impact? Not that, small or big impact, there's, one's better than the other, because you need the whole thing. But for me personally, I wanted something that was beyond my like neighborhood, beyond my community, beyond my city. So co-working became that. And yeah, I was able to kind of prototype and ideate and really go talk to the customers. So what we did was we actually spoke to 100 different community managers around the country. We met with the ones local to us and really understood what they were trying to do and why they, were using so many different systems and why they had a challenge with hiring and why operations was so hard, and really got to understand like, yeah, it's so many different parts. Like most traditional office leases is here's 20 years, sign the dotted line, here's your keys, good luck, right? Like we gave you the building, everything else is on you. With co-working, you've got to do so many different things, and these are really just community builders or maybe some real estate professionals, but they're not. Oftentimes they don't even have any hospitality experience. People are in this space. Yeah. They just want to, build and engage with their community. So yeah, so I was able to really just spend my time talking to them, working with them, getting something out quickly. And that was kind of by design. Now, it sounds great, but I will say, we had different problems. Like technology, fine, great, cool. But we didn't have marketing. We didn't have sales. We didn't have, any finances. And so a lot of those other skill sets that maybe other people come out of the gate and they've got their business plan and their pro formas and they've got these things that when you do want to go raise money, there may be more set up. And their only pitch is, hey, I've already worked out all the numbers. Once we get to technology, then we'll do this. We kind of had the other thing. We're like, well, we have the technology, and I thought that would be more valuable. But the investors just said the same thing. They were just like, cool, well, when you have the numbers, then we'll give you money. And like I would hear from my peers, like, oh, investors told me all the numbers make sense, and as soon as we have the product, they'll fundraise. I think, or they'll give us the money. And I think the real truth is, you just got to go figure it out. You got to build the product and you got to get the sales and marketing. So having one or the other doesn't really matter. You got to figure out a way to just get there before people get interested and give you money to scale. But certainly I feel like we were able to avoid a lot of if you're a software product, obviously the app is a pretty important part of the business. So I think we were de-risked in that regard. Like the app wasn't going to be bad. It was just, we had to go execute. But yeah, it was an interesting kind of way to build. But again, a lot of that was actually by design.
So you've mentioned your time at NCSU, North Carolina State University, a couple times now. And Danielle is in the room with us now, who also went to NC State. So I'm in the minority, but that's okay. That is okay. I'm not ashamed of that. But one thing that I think is really underrated in networking is like your college experience and like the relationships you make while in college.
For sure.
And I really genuinely wish college was like presented differently than what it is now. Right? Because if someone had said, college is where you're going to meet a lot of your future coworkers and like potential clients and customers and people who are going to write, maybe recommending you for jobs, like that is a very different pitch than, hey, go to college, take out all these loans, and you'll get a job that's going to pay you back, because that may or may not be the truth at this point in life. So talk to me about kind of like, maybe the light bulb switch for you when you started creating in college. You're like, why wait? Why wait till I graduate to start creating the things that, are just like allowing me to express myself creatively?
Yeah, 100%. I think that, I like what you said about sort of pitching college in a different way, like marketing it differently, because you're 100% right. Like, our first customers at Lithios were people that I literally went to school with, and then they went off and did stuff, and paid us to go build stuff for them. Met my eventual business partners there. We were really fortunate that we were able to, I think, use the NC State network as our initial testing ground for entrepreneurship. So, and I think that's the big key for me is I just so happened to kind of accidentally get involved with entrepreneurship at NC State. When I was there, it was still very nascent. You couldn't major in entrepreneurship. You can now, which I'm not salty about at all, but it's all good. When I was there, they had built this space called the Garage, which at the time was like a really, really tiny office suite, basically, on the edge of campus. Like the buses didn't even go out there. You had to like get off and then like walk, and all my
Sounds
friends
like this
would be
grimy little like hidden secret.
well, yeah, I remember my friends would be like, "Where are you taking me?" And I'm like, "Don't worry about it. Like, it's this cool, like, it's for entrepreneurs and like key card access only." But it was just like super sketchy for sure.
Yeah.
So everyone, and then they got in there and they're like, "Whoa!" And there was 3D printer and laser cutter and a whiteboard. But anyway, they were still prototyping it out, and I was just kind of fortunate. I kind of stumbled into it. I took a class, EI 201, with Jen Cabs. Shout out to Jen Cabs. She was like telling us about it because it was brand new. And she was like, "We just opened up the space, you can apply," and blah, blah, blah. So for me, I got plugged into the community and the entrepreneurship community at NC State. And what's really great about that was it was interdisciplinary. So it was the only place, I think, on campus where they actually didn't care about trying to like the design school was very like, we're the design school. So we're going to incubate our design students and, focus on their skills but they don't ever talk to anyone outside the design school. Engineers, which is where I was at, same thing. You just get lost in the engineering bubble. So this kind of exposed me to this idea of actually using the network. NC State has 30,000 students. Absolutely insane amount of opportunity there when it comes to networking and, testing out ideas and being creative. So that really helped me kind of think about things differently. And then I met a couple other people. We started building things, and it was awesome to be able to launch an app and literally have access to thousands of people who have a similar interest as you, because you're all students. And I think that's the big thing. When you leave college and then you're going out into the real world, it's a lot harder to find a bunch of other people who share some sort of like common thread with you that you can easily kind of pull out without, getting to know them and learning how to network and learning how to communicate with people. Everybody has a thread, but you got to learn how to do that and network and build that. But when you're in school, you just walk up to somebody and, go pack. And now you're like bonded. And so I think using that is a really key opportunity. I also was a Park Scholar at NC State. And so they really focus on training you how to be leaders and communicate. And we actually have classes and programming dedicated to learning how to network and learning how to, leverage, your student community and solving problems, and even networking with professors, which that's definitely something colleges need to get better at. It's just like professors are the ones who give you those bad grades or who you have to go to their office hours, you have to ask for stuff. They're the biggest asset. If you can actually learn how to communicate with them, they're going to get you the internships, the jobs, the whatever. So anyway, I think it's definitely a big opportunity. I think that's what really helped me succeed in the entrepreneurial world, at least so young and so early, was that I was able to use entrepreneurship at State and tap into that skill of networking and prototyping and failing when you have a safety net, and getting feedback. And that way, when we came into, the real world, and that's part of why I got into co-working, was that I was actually purposefully looking for another community. And had I not used the university in that way, I don't know, I would have known to look for that. I would have just been like, I'm not sure where to start. But I actually was like, how can I find another place where I can actually be around people that may, that we can help each other. And that's what kind of led me to co-working.
Nice. So one last question before I let you get out of here. Well, actually, that's a lie. We have a little fun thing at the end, but one last official question.
Sure.
So as you kind of hinted at earlier, and for people who may not be familiar with co-working spaces, there's definitely more than one model, right?
Yeah.
And some of them are more just kind of generalized co-working spaces for anyone who needs a space, meeting space, individual office, dedicated desk, what have you.
Right.
There are some that are more event forward that have like dedicated event space, and they are kind of featured around that. There are some that are structured like a social club, which was actually my first introduction to a co-working space, believe it or not. It's a co-working space that no longer exists in Durham, so I don't know what that says about it, but
it does happen.
But it was more of a social club, and it was like more about the cultural experience and like learning more about like the Durham community rather than just like being a workspace, which it was that. But it also had like a really cute bar. It was just a vibe.
Nice.
And then we're seeing more now that are kind of geared towards makers, geared towards creators. So having like a creative space, a photo studio, a podcast studio. So having more options for how people can have a space that they don't own, like this big lease, this big long-term lease,
right,
to get the things that they need to create the things that they want to create,
right,
or do the things that they want to do. So how do you see like Coworks kind of evolving to meet the needs of like this growing and evolving definition of what it means to be a co-working space?
Yeah, I love that question, and I think this is really what made me so passionate about Coworks from the beginning. I talked about wanting something that had that bigger impact. And, you know, I think the big light bulb moment for me, beyond knowing that, okay, every single co-working space manager faces the same challenges and we can actually help them through software. Now we do. But the other thing is like seeing the potential of where the future of co-working was going to go. And to me, like I immediately kind of knew, and this is pre-COVID, so people at the time thought I was kind of crazy, but I knew that this was going to be sort of the future of work, and that it was also blending in these other kind of social things. And I just saw so many different avenues that this kind of style of space would become the obvious choice in the future. And so, you know, fast forward to now, like we are in spaces all over the world. So we're international. You know, we focus on co-working spaces because I think they really help lay the foundation for those business models that you talked about. Like, okay, we can do dedicated desks. We can do, you know, open co-working. Let's try nights and weekends. Let's try also doing event rentals as part of the business too. I was literally just at a wedding in our co-working space last weekend before last. Full wedding. And it was awesome. And then they turned it to a dance floor. Like they had the reception, like, and it's because it's these beautiful spaces that are really intentionally designed for collaboration. But now we're actually working with universities. So full circle moment, NC State is actually a customer of Coworks now. That little garage thing that I mentioned that was super sketchy is now a 20,000 square foot building on campus, on Centennial campus. And it's a true entrepreneur center with a maker space for students, with a co-working space for the entrepreneurial students, and businesses like regular startups and John Deere, big companies, also have office space in the same building. So it's like a legitimate co-working space in the middle of campus that just has all kinds of energy and activity going through it.
Nice.
And they use Coworks to manage that space. So that's a good example. We're in a bunch of universities. I'm actually going to a conference in a few weeks on that. We have maker spaces. We have these like shared lab space co-working as well. So, you know, if you think about a biotech company, normally you've got to literally buy a lab space and you don't get to pick and choose how big you want it to be. If the building's there and they're like, here's the space. And then you got to do all of the safety certifications and all of that. Like there's a whole, like, not my specialty at all, but these shared lab space come in where they say, we've already got the space and the certifications and safety. You can just pay for one bench, one office, one whatever, and then you get access. So we've seen that they use Coworks to kind of help manage access to the different equipment and access to that community. Social clubs, we've got a really great customer out in, they've got a few locations in Seattle and Denver, and they have this like wine club. And so basically it's like a wine cellar and you can store your own kind of like liquors and drinks and wines, and it's climate controlled. And it is a club basically. But during the day, it's workspace. You can come in there, knock stuff out. And then in the evenings, they've got music, they've got events, you've got your tastings. And it's just like really popped off, and people love that idea of having the space when they need it, and that kind of fits their needs at that moment. So yeah, and then again with COVID and this huge influx of remote work and flex work, we're also seeing just traditional office buildings and companies in these traditional office spaces saying, we want to take half of our floor and just rent it out to other companies and do co-working. So they're kind of unofficial co-working spaces, or they're like, help us redo our office so that it feels like a co-working space. So there's like literally just regular commercial real estate and offices are moving towards co-working, but they're not all calling it the same thing. They're all kind of doing it different ways, but it's all based on the same model. And it's the same things that, we're trying to help facilitate when it comes to both A, put a system in place, make it easy to operate, and B, once you have that operational efficiency, focus on being dynamic in the space and activating the community and really figuring out how to provide, whatever resources to depending on whatever model you want to do. So anyway, I think that's going to continue. I think we're going to see more and more of these dedicated maker spaces and lab spaces and art podcast. We've seen that too, like co-working spaces that are just studios and artists and producers come in and, they're members of that space and they go in and they create. Same idea. They run into another artist that they wouldn't have met before because it's not owned by like a label. It's a shared community. So people walk in and they're working on a project and now they're signed because they just happen to be in the same space. So I think we're going to see so much more of that as people, just change their relationship with physical space and with work and want something flexible.
Yeah.
So,
no, I love it. I love it. I'm excited to see what's coming next. Don't know if I'll get to experience all this, but I hope so. I hope so. They sound so fun.
For sure.
So we have some rapid fire questions for you. Are you game for that?
Let's do it.
Let's do it. All right. What is your biggest accomplishment as an entrepreneur?
Oh man. I would say so far probably raising a big round of capital. Yeah.
Okay. What define big?
Million plus.
Okay. Big spender. Here. Okay. What's the biggest lesson you've learned as an entrepreneur?
Biggest lesson is team. You can have the best product. You can have money. I've seen startups blow through some money. You can have all kinds of stuff, but you got to have the right people in place because, it all starts from the top down when you're building a culture and you're building an organization. So a lot of people kind of skip that step, but it's like the most important step. Like you got to have the right people.
Gotcha. I can confer. We'll take that. Who is a creative figure, since you're a creator, or a founder that you look up to and why?
That's a good question. I think creator, I am a big Childish Gambino fan, aka Donald Glover, just because of how he's done everything. So actor, rapper, director, writer. He actually did some programming too. A lot of people don't know that. He had like a whole coding phase. So I just kind of like how he's sort of approached like life in general is art and creativity, and you can do it through a lot of different mediums, but everything is about how do you tell a story and things like that. And founder wise, there's probably too many to name. I definitely did a lot of Steve Jobs research. He wasn't the best leader, probably. He was a little psychopathic, but just his approach to product and user experience and the legacy that kind of Apple still uses. Like, I love that as far as just, let's not just make an app and figure out how to sell as many units as possible, but how do we also give them a never before seen attention to detail user experience or design. I like that a lot.
Nice. Last one, little crazy. What would be the title of your autobiography?
Oh man. Let's see. Title of my autobiography would be, let's see. I gotta think of something decent here. I would say Deshawn Brown, He built dope stuff. That's it. Just keep it simple, keep it fresh. He built dope stuff.
Okay. If you want to be known for building dope stuff, I think that's a good autobiography for sure.
There you go.
Yeah, that's a simple goal. That's a good one to have. Thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate you coming to talk about all things co-working and just your approach to designing incredible experiences for people.
Thank you. It was a pleasure. Loved it.
That's all for today's episode. And if you can't wait for the next episode, you can subscribe to our paid membership on Substack to get exclusive content like outtakes, bloopers, after-show thoughts, and more. If you enjoyed this episode, please be sure to give us a 5-star rating on your app of choice or like this video on YouTube. We'll catch you in the next episode.